Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for logging on today. We're going to take a few more minutes to allow others to join, and then we'll get things started.
Greetings. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all to our 36th webinar in the Coffee with series hosted by the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University. I'm Reggie Lewis, Executive Director of the Greenleaf Center, and it's great to greet all of you who've logged on today to take part in our conversation with former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jeh Johnson, a servant leader whose mark on the world will be felt for generations to come. I'll give a more formal intro of Secretary Johnson in a minute, but first a word about our webinar series and the Greenleaf Center. The Coffee with series provides the center the chance to showcase the inspirational stories of servant leaders and the endless ways in which individuals, organizations, and society in general can be transformed by the power of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve.
In observance of Black History Month, the Greenleaf Center dedicates this webinar to the generations of African American servant leaders whose invaluable contributions have strengthened the fabric of American life. Mary McLeod Bethune was a pioneering educator and civil rights leader who became the first African American woman to lead a federal agency when appointed by President FDR in 1935. Brigadier General Charles McGee was a celebrated Tuskegee Airman and a fighter pilot who flew hundreds of combat missions across World War I, the Korean War, and Vietnam War. Fannie Lou Hamer was a fearless Mississippi sharecropper turned civil rights leader, known for her pivotal role in securing voting rights for African Americans, co-founding the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and coining the phrase, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Dr. Martin Luther King is often narrowly regarded as a civil rights leader who gave a beautiful speech about a dream. Less known, however, is the work that he and others organized in support of the 1967 Poor People's Campaign, a multiracial effort on economic justice, the alleviation of poverty, expanded access to jobs, and decent, safe, and affordable housing. And last but not least, we pay homage to the late Reverend Jesse Jackson, who passed less than 10 days ago on February 17th. His trailblazing efforts concerning voting rights and seeking the nomination for presidency laid the foundation for a dramatic increase in African American representation in electoral politics.
Thank you, Gabby. The values of these and other African American servant leaders strongly aligns with those of the center's founder and creator of the modern movement of servant leadership, Robert K. Greenleaf. For over 60 years, the Greenleaf Center has worked to promote the awareness, understanding, and practice of servant leadership. In addition to the Coffee With series, other core programs include the Greenleaf Scholars Program, which funds researchers examining the efficacy and impact of servant leadership. Our virtual courses for professionals learning about the everyday principles of servant leadership. We also expose high school and college students to opportunities to develop lives of service through our Next Generation initiative. And through our outside engagements, we proudly work closely with organizational partners as they work to foster optimal growth in employees and nurture vibrant teams to achieve greater impact. Before a proper introduction of our guests, I'd be remiss in not acknowledging the generous sponsorship of the Greenleaf Center's 2026 Coffee with Webinar series, the Terrell Fund. The Terrell Fund is a foundation that serves children and families in New Jersey and Vermont. The fund works collaboratively across sectors to make an impact in such issue areas as early childhood, K-12 education, the arts, family support, and more. Thank you, thank you, thank you to our dear friends at the Terrell Fund. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for. It's truly an honor to welcome today's guest, Mr. Jeh Johnson, an accomplished public servant, lawyer, and national security leader. Secretary Johnson, I should say Mr. Johnson, served as U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security from 2013 to 2017, after previously holding senior legal roles, including General Counsel of the Department of Defense and General Counsel of the Department of the Air Force. Earlier in his career, he was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York and spent many years as a distinguished trial lawyer at the law firm Paul, Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, where he became the firm's first African American partner. He currently serves as co-chair of the Columbia University Board of Trustees and sits on several major corporate and nonprofit boards. A graduate of Morehouse College and Columbia Law School, Mr. Johnson has received numerous national honors, recognizing his lifelong commitment to public service and the rule of law. Most notably, in 2018, Mr. Johnson received the Ronald Reagan Peace Through Strength Award. We are so honored to have you here today, sir. Secretary Johnson, are you ready to dive in?
Here, here I am.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me.
So great that you are with
I
us.
did I did that right on cue, right? Just like you asked me to do.
You are right. You were right on cue.
Okay.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Feel free to have some coffee during this coffee hour with us. And I want to remind the audience that you will have an opportunity to raise some questions with our distinguished secretary, so you can begin to think about those questions and load them up in our Zoom Q&A feature. We'll begin by getting a sense of the man, his formative years. Sir, tell us where you grew up and what were your fondest memories of childhood.
Well, first, Reginald. Um,
You got to call me
thank
Reggie. When I hear Reginald,
Reggie.
I
Okay,
hear
okay,
I hear the fifth grade principal calling me to the office again.
okay. Well, when I hear Reggie, I think Reggie Jackson. So, for reasons I'll explain in a moment. First of all, thank you for paying tribute to two distinguished African Americans who I think don't get enough attention. One is Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer is not a household name, but she was a courageous civil rights leader in Mississippi in the 1960s. And to be a civil rights leader in Mississippi in the 1960s, you do indeed have to be courageous. Medgar Evers was assassinated as a civil rights leader in Mississippi in the 1960s. The other is Charles McGee,
Yes.
Tuskegee Airman, two of my uncles were Tuskegee Airmen,
Oh.
one of whom participated in the famous Freeman Field Mutiny
Mm.
in at Freeman Field in Indiana in April 1945.
Mm.
So anyway, thanks for paying tribute to those among the others. Um, so I was born in New York City. My birthday is September 11th, 1957.
Mm.
I was born at a time when my father was still an architecture student at Columbia. My mother had graduated from Sarah Lawrence. They lived on the Upper West Side. We moved to Corona, Queens
Mm.
when I was just a few months old.
Mm.
Many African Americans who wanted to leave Harlem and go out to what was for them the suburbs moved to Corona, Queens in the 1950s. And we lived there for a couple of years. I watched Shea Stadium
Mm.
rise from the swamp, Flushing Meadows,
Okay.
and under construction. And then when I was 5 or 6, we did something that I never completely understood. We moved upstate to a little town called Wappingers Falls, New York, in Dutchess County, about 70 miles north of Manhattan.
Mm.
And my father moved his architecture practice to a firm in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mm.
And he became a lecturer at Vassar College, where he stayed for 37 years. And I was, and that's where I grew up. I was basically my hometown until I left for college. I was not a good student. If there are any students listening to this, do not follow my example. I was a late bloomer.
Mm.
Um, and I just basically, once I got to high school, I had no real motivation to study.
Mm.
I wanted to be, and I was certain I would be, left fielder for the New York Mets.
Okay.
And I didn't need to study. I
Okay.
was gonna be Cleon Jones.
Okay.
How old are you, Reggie?
I'm 57.
You're too young to remember Cleon Jones.
Okay.
So he was, the left fielder for the 1969 championship Mets, and I was going to be the left fielder for the New York Mets. And so you ask, what were my fondest memories growing up? It's on the baseball field,
Okay.
Sandlot baseball in Wappingers Falls, New York.
All right.
And I carried that dream with me all the way to Morehouse College.
Mm.
And my lackadaisical study habits continued. I have 13 honorary degrees, but I never successfully completed beyond 10th grade math.
Mm.
I took ninth grade math in ninth grade in high school and flunked. I
Mm.
retook ninth grade math in 10th grade. I took 10th grade math in 11th grade. I took 11th grade math in 12th grade and flunked the New York State Regents.
Okay.
Somehow I got into Morehouse
All
College.
right.
And I had a 1.8 GPA at Morehouse
Mm. Mm.
my
Mm.
freshman year.
Wow.
And then finally the inspiration and the fever at Morehouse College reached me. And by sophomore year, I had become a B student and then an A student. But my fondest memories growing up were um, just at home plate, swinging a baseball bat, trying to imitate Hank Aaron. And every once in a while, I still close my eyes and have the dream of that pitch coming in low and inside and then hitting it 300 feet. But anyway, that's my fondest memory.
Oh, wow. That's quite a memory. And a little hard to believe given your distinguished profile. By the way, out of curiosity, so was Hugh Gloucester your president?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hugh,
Yeah.
Hugh Gloucester was president when I graduated in the class of 1979,
Yeah.
the greatest class to ever
No.
finish Morehouse College.
Maybe the class of 1990, sir. Maybe the class of 1990, my year. Hugh
Well,
Gloucester I came in his last year as president.
okay. Well, I was just down in Atlanta a week and a half ago for the inauguration of the new president.
That's right.
So 79 included Spike,
That's it. It did. Okay.
Martin Luther King III, my lifelong friend,
Yeah.
Robert Mallet, former Deputy Secretary of Commerce,
That's true.
So we had a collection of
Yeah,
impressive folks.
I will yield to our distinguished guests. And it was great that you mentioned mom and dad. I've got to let our audience know a little bit more about your family because you hail from a family of African American servant leaders. You mentioned your mom was at Lawrence College, where she was a model student at Sarah Lawrence College, and
Mhm.
she dedicated her entire professional life to supporting women's health. Your dad, you mentioned that he had a practice as an architect, but a lot of folk are not
Mhm.
aware that he was the co-founder of the National Organization of Minority Architects,
Mhm.
in addition to serving as professor at Vassar College. And then let's not leave out your grandfather, Charles Spurgeon Johnson, who is not only a renowned sociologist, but the first Black president of Fisk University. I got to ask you, Mr. Secretary, did you feel some pressure growing up in a family of achievers?
Actually, no, because growing up, I was oblivious to all of that.
Mm, mm,
Um, I wasn't really like so many others who were 18 and 19. I was kind of a bit. I was oblivious to the family tree, and
interesting.
it was only later, once I became a professional, that I became more in tune with the family history.
Mm,
My wife is convinced that I'm Charles S. Johnson's reincarnation.
okay.
He passed away 11 months before I was born,
Oh, okay.
and I'm proud of my family history.
Mm,
One thing I will pass on is there are Black history. A Black family tree has many outstanding features for all of us if you take the time to learn it.
mm,
And I
mm.
was the subject of a Henry Louis Gates Finding Your Roots episode a couple of years ago. And that's how I learned a lot of my family history, going all the way back to the 15th century.
Wow.
I have a direct ancestor who fought in the American Revolutionary War.
Mm,
Learn that. But you can find amazing stories in your own family tree if you bother to take the time to do the homework.
look at that. Mm, thank you for that. Um, we hit on a bit about undergrad days. If you would share with our audience how your undergraduate time at Morehouse, but also your legal training at Columbia influenced your eventual interest into government, particularly at the federal government level.
So that's a good question. Morehouse, as you know, is just wall to wall, night and day inspiration.
Mm,
I grew up in a overwhelmingly white atmosphere community. Being around so many other Black men who were inspired, energetic, motivated, studied hard was I caught the fever myself.
mm,
And the aura of Dr. King and so many other great Morehouse men on campus, Benjamin Mays, it was impossible not to get inspired.
mm,
And
mm,
by the time I left college and entered law school, I knew that I wanted to be a big deal corporate lawyer at some point. And I also knew that I wanted a career in public service, so twin objectives. And so I naturally was very interested in the careers of people who had done both.
mm, mm,
And so when I left college, when I left law school, I knew I wanted to have a career in both. I never quite imagined that I would climb to the levels that I did climb.
mm.
One thing I always remember from my law school graduation speech was the speaker was Andrew Young, civil
Oh,
rights
wow.
leader Andrew
Yeah.
Young. and I was class of 82 from Columbia. He said one thing that I have repeated a number of times in my own commencement addresses, which is in your lifetime, you will see and do things beyond your current comprehension. And looking back 44 years ago, I know he was absolutely right. One thing, I never could have comprehended this device. I never could have comprehended in 1982 a device that was your phone,
Yeah.
your mail, a
Yeah.
map,
That's
a
right.
radio, had this thing called the internet where you could instantaneously send a letter to somebody,
That's right.
text, um, and a massive library.
Hmm.
What now takes me 20 seconds to learn would take me several hours in the library at college or law school if they were even open. Right? This would have been beyond my comprehension. Absolutely. The other thing beyond my comprehension, if you had told me in 1982, um, there's this other kid on the Columbia campus with, like you, an African first name. His name is Barack. And he's going to be one day the president of the United States. That in and of itself would have blown my mind because I never would have thought I'd see a black president in my lifetime. And you're going to be in his cabinet leading the Department of Homeland Security, which didn't even exist in 1982.
That's right.
I would have said, you're smoking something. Um, and so, in that way, life is wonderful if you're willing to
Mm.
work hard and entertain opportunities you didn't quite see coming.
Wow, look at that. And thankfully, Andrew Young is still with us,
That's right.
which is wonderful. And so much obviously is possible. Let's talk about a couple of those significant roles in which you hit those twin objectives in
Mhm.
service to at the federal government level. And you certainly, I should say to our audience in particular, Secretary Johnson left his mark as a servant leader and the Pentagon's chief lawyer under President Barack Obama, but also under Defense Secretary Robert Gates. And certainly you had influence, sir, on a number of major issues, but one in particular is your influence on how detainees are treated and held at detention camps such as Guantanamo Bay. By the end of your tenure, it became clear that you helped to move U.S. policy toward one consistent or more consistent with international law and U.S. courts. Why is it important for the United States to model and or conform to generally acceptable detainee practices within the international community?
Well, we obviously set an example for everybody else. When I was in office as the lawyer for the Defense Department, I used to say that it was important that we hold to traditional legal principles in their application in a very untraditional, unconventional armed conflict, which is what we were in against Al Qaeda post 9/11. And staying consistent, true to your values, true to the law, true to your oath, was very, very important to me. It was important to President Obama that we be an administration that adheres to the rule of law, both domestically and internationally. Um, did we get it? Did we always get it right? No.
Mm.
His second day in office, he signed an executive order pledging to close Guantanamo. And Congress basically prevented us from doing that. And Guantanamo Bay, as a detainee center, is still there, although the number of detainees are a fraction of what they used to be. Um, and I'm proud of the record we established in the space of national security law. So often I found myself in that job at the focal point between what the US military wanted to do and what the Obama administration wanted to do. And sometimes they were a little different. And I was kind of in the center, in the middle. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, for example, is a perfect that's an illustration of what what I'm talking about. And on detainee treatment, on our counterterrorism operations, um, we have to do what is necessary to keep the American people safe, but always consistent with the law and our values. Some people think one is in conflict with the other, but they're not. And that is true as well in the immigration enforcement space, which I'm sure we'll get to.
We will. Um, Truly appreciating your response to that um, in our quest to keep our nation safe, we should always do it in a way that are consistent, do it in a way that is consistent with our values. Um, During your time with the Department of Homeland Security, you oversaw millions of deportations. And
Mm-hmm.
while many Americans can agree that immigration enforcement is necessary to protect against foreign threats, um, the question is, what is different about the Obama administration's operations compared to what we're seeing now? And also, a fact that a number of our guests may not be aware of, there was a point in time, and this reflects on your time in office, sir, in which President Obama was derided as deporter in chief. So this was not an administration that wasn't tough on folk, getting across that border. But what do you say to, the contrast between your time, the Obama administration's period, and now?
Well, we could spend the rest of the hour on
Yes.
just that question alone. Let me start with this. The, I've come to the conclusion that the best immigration policy is one either that you don't hear anything about because no one's screaming at you, or both sides, right and left, are screaming at you at the same time about something very different. The best immigration policy in this country is something that is seemingly in conflict with itself. On the one hand, um, we should securing our border is a legitimate government objective. Let's strip out of that all of the racist components of what happens at our border. There is a racist component to it. A lot of Americans have embraced the great replacement theory that the browning of America is somehow a threat to us, and we have to keep these people out. But put that aside, jettison that. A secure border is a legitimate government objective. Americans are entitled for this powerful nation to know who's coming into our country. That's a legitimate objective. And President Obama did not shy away from that objective, in part because our goal was to achieve comprehensive immigration reform. Republicans would say, well, you can't have comprehensive immigration reform until you secure the border first. And so numbers of deportations are not necessarily a reflection of immigration policy because they do ebb and flow depending on the number of illegal border crossings. There's a correlation there. And yes, we did deport lots of people. It is also true that by the second term, when I was in office, the number of illegal crossings had reached some of their lowest levels in years. My second year in office, I think there were 330,000 crossings in the entire year on the southern border, second lowest number since 1972. So there's an ebb and flow of this based upon perceived changes in our enforcement policy in the United States. So if the perception in Central and South America is that we're lax, the numbers are going to climb. If the perception is we've ratcheted down on our enforcement, the numbers are going to drop. But here's the corollary. So long as the push factors exist in these source countries, the crime, the poverty, the violence, the famine, the drought, global warming, they're going to keep coming. Families are going to make the basic choice. I'd rather be in the United States, even for a couple of years, than stay here before the gangs
Mm.
kidnap my son and make him go to work for them. So that's the border security component of this. And on the flip side of that is we have to find a way to be humane and use common sense when it comes to the people who are already here, who are here in this country, who've been here for years, who haven't committed any crimes, have a job, they want to be on the books, they want to pay taxes, they want a driver's license, they want to be accountable. That population is in the millions. We interact with them in a number of communities, particularly here in the Northeast, on a daily basis, whether you know it or not. DACA was a great idea in 2012. DACA is an example of this, where through executive action, we came up with a policy to take care of undocumented who came here as kids, who didn't have a choice. They were brought here as kids. And they received what we refer to as deferred action and a work authorization. And the DACA class is truly extraordinary. There are Yale law students who are DACA recipients. We had an associate at Paul Weiss who was a DACA recipient.
Wow.
And so being fair and humane to the people who are already here is also a legitimate government objective. And we wanted to achieve that in comprehensive immigration reform, secure the border, take care of people who are here. But unfortunately, the politics of this issue have overwhelmed any effort at smart solutions. The political calculus that people have made, that politicians have made, I'd rather have this issue to complain about than fix the issue. The proof of that was 2 years ago when Senator Jim Lankford, a Republican, came together with Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat, on a bill that had bipartisan support. And frankly, the Trump faction said, no, 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 no. We don't want to fix the problem. We want Trump to be able to complain about the problem.
Yeah.
And so long as that political dynamic exists on the right or the left,
Right.
this problem is going to persist. The one other thing I'll say about deportations, the enforcement side of our immigration policy, I know others, certainly in the Obama administration, we tried to have a macro and a micro level approach to this. What do I mean by that? I spent a lot of time on the southern border. I think I made 12 trips to the southern border in 3 years, where I would come face to face with these families, these kids. I would talk to them through a translator. Why did you come here? To understand their stories. Why were they so determined to travel on foot or by freight train through the entire country of Mexico heading north just to reach the southern border? And as a dad, I wanted to take a lot of these kids, scoop them up, put them on my plane, and fly them home with me. But I couldn't do that, obviously. But back in Washington, when it was time to make that high-level macro policy decision, I kept in mind those kids. And so when Tom Homan, today's border czar, who used to work for me, presented to me the idea of family separation, I encouraged these people, bring me all lawful options, no matter how crazy. He presented to me the idea of family separation. I said, no, we're not going there. Because I could still picture, fresh in my mind, the image of a 19-year-old mother from Guatemala clinging to her 3-month-old baby. I couldn't ask a Border Patrol agent to take that child away from its mother. And so it was easy to say no to that. But, a good immigration policy, unfortunately, is one where the activists on the left are screaming at you as deporter in chief, and the activists on the right are accusing you of having open borders or you know, and so there's no real joy in that, but that's probably the best equilibrium to try to achieve. And
Well,
I think we did that in the Obama years.
mm, well, well, thank you for your service on that issue, and just reminding us of the importance of um, treating all individuals as humanely as possible. That too is in the interest of our nation. We could talk all day. I've got to move on to our next category of African American servant leaders and efforts to unfortunately erase Black history.
Mm.
Arguably, we've all grown accustomed to paying homage to a limited, more familiar number of historic figures, as you alluded to earlier at the beginning of our talk. Um, a limited number of people to be recognized during annual Black History Month celebrations. Yet there are so many unknown African American men and women who have made tremendous contributions to the development and prosperity of our nation. So when you think, Mr. Secretary, about African American servant leaders who are not as well known, but who have made an indelible impact in government or in the defense of our country, are there two or three that come to mind for you?
Yes. And thank you for the opportunity to think about the answer to this question. This
Ah,
book.
yeah,
Okay, you recognize this book,
yes,
right? What is probably less familiar to you is it was co-authored
yeah,
by Stokely Carmichael
yeah,
and a Columbia professor of political science named Charles V. Hamilton. Stokely was the outspoken one.
yeah,
Charles Hamilton was the less obvious one, who really was the intellectual engine behind this book.
mm,
And he was like almost a family member to me. He and
mm,
my father were very close. They were about the same age. And very soft spoken man, um, very, very progressive in his views about Black power. This book really was the architecture for the Black Power movement in
mm,
the late 60s and 70s, written principally by Charles Hamilton.
mm.
I won't say Stokely was the front man for this. That would be unfair. But Chuck was really the intellectual engine behind this book. He was surveilled by the FBI,
Mm.
but he was so low key that when he passed away, it took the New York Times obituary page something like a year before they realized he had passed away.
Wow.
Yeah, they did justice to his career in his obit, which was about a year ago.
Mm.
Um, but he is a less than heralded, um, um, consequential figure in Black history.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Um,
I'm also
there,
fascinated by the people who served, Blacks who served as members of Congress during the Reconstruction period.
yes,
How
yes,
many people know that there was a Black U.S. Senator
right,
during Reconstruction?
right. There are a few of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Um, which is why the African American experience is so critical to understanding American history, and yet there's no exaggeration, and we try to on these talks to make certain that we're nonpartisan, and as balanced as possible. But it's fair to say that there is no exaggeration, that there are significant efforts underway at the federal government level to systematically erase and purge American history of the African American experience, including slavery, racism, but also our triumphs and contributions. Just recently, as you know, sir, the slavery exhibits in Philadelphia outside of the historic Liberty Bell were reinstalled at the order of a federal judge in response to the current administration's efforts to have them permanently removed. Curious, as a man who promotes the rule of law, um, what are your thoughts about the sanitizing of the African American historical narrative, and what can we do about it? What can we really do about it?
Um, Well, we can always tell our own story
Mm,
in forums like this one. Um, Nothing can stop us from doing that.
mm,
It's important to remember that Black history is fundamentally American history. Um, we're interwoven.
okay.
I had, we're I have Black ancestors who fought in the American Civil War, and I have white slave owner ancestors who fought in the American Revolutionary War.
Mm,
Now, what do I do about that? Do I pretend like those white ancestors never existed?
mm,
That I'm not, they're not in my DNA? No, it'd be like trying to cut off your arm.
right.
But it's quintessentially the American story. I think that I think that this effort underway right now will pass.
Okay.
Uh, there's a pendulum effect to American politics. Every 4 or 8 or maybe 16 years, we want something radically different from what we had before for our political leadership in this country. For example, 1960, we had generational change. We went from Eisenhower to Kennedy. Then 16 years later, we went from Nixon Ford to Carter. And then in 92, we went from Bush to Clinton. These are all generational shifts. And then in 08, of course, we went from Bush to Obama. The next one was supposed to be 24, but that
Mm,
didn't happen. And so by 28, I believe the American voter is going to be looking for something very different from what we have now,
interesting.
both in terms of age and generation and in
Mm,
terms of our politics. That pendulum swings at least once every 8 years. We may be to a point where it swings every 2 years
interesting.
with the midterms next. By November 26, a lot of people are speculating that all the energy and motivation will be on the Democratic side, where a year and a half ago it was the other way. It's part of the reason why some of our longer term systemic problems in this country persist, like the national debt or global
Right.
warming, because every 2 years there's a massive, or every 4 years there's policy change, and the priorities shift. And so I think that this particular era in our politics is not the new normal, and that all we have to do, those who are concerned about the direction we're headed, is remain engaged, participate, not just by voting, participate, be an activist. Um, and that's how change happens from the ground up. We're still a democracy, despite what people are worried about. We're still a democracy. And our political leadership responds to public opinion. Believe me, they look at those approval polls multiple times a day.
Hope that what we're experiencing will pass, that this is not the new normal. A nice segue into the last question I have for you. I'm being nudged by some young folk here on campus that I'm hogging all the time with you. But I have to ask, Mr. Secretary, on September 10th, the day before your birthday in 2025, the American Bar Association's Task Force for American Democracy issued its final report. You co-chaired that distinguished task force with retired federal appellate judge J. Michael Luddick.
I did.
You sure did. Just
Mm-hmm.
so our audience knows, this was a bipartisan task force of distinguished judges, lawyers, civic leaders, business executives, and academics.
There it
Yes,
is.
there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Who spent 2 years examining the challenges facing our democracy. And you came up with some sweeping and timely recommendations. You already hit on a few. Um, Again, though, particularly for those who are not as optimistic as perhaps you or I, how do we make sure this good work leads to critical action during a deep, entrenched period of or I should say,
Yeah.
tremendous period of polarization and divisiveness in our nation today.
Well, you've asked the fundamental question. Um, and I believe that, and this is what this report attempts to do, we need to examine not just the end results, but the underlying systemic factors that have led to the end results of today's politics. The American public is restless,
Yeah.
disgusted, fed up, conspiratorial,
Mm.
cynical, and many are just plain tuned out. Trust in government has collapsed
Yes.
over the course of our lifetime. When I was, in the late 1950s, the American people, according to polls, a Pew Research study on trust in government, polls reflected that the American people believed that our government would do the right thing something like 70% of the time.
Right.
Now that's like in the single digits.
Yeah.
I think social media has a lot to do with that.
Mhm.
Um, but efforts like citizen commissions to redraw legislative district lines, one of our recommendations in that report, are actually gaining currency in swing states like Ohio, for example. When you put it to the citizens in a ballot initiative, would you prefer this over that? They're gonna choose the smart thing. And so citizen redistricting commissions with no politicians involved. Right now you have a system where the politicians pick their voters and the voters are not picking the politicians. And you have 400, something like 400 safe seats in the House of Representatives as a result. That open nonpartisan primaries,
Mm.
something called fusion voting,
Yeah.
ranked choice voting. These are things that will lead to a more responsive government, government elected officials more accountable to the people they were elected to serve. I think that's the answer to a lot of our problems right now. And we wrote this report in the hope that the recommendations we make will be as relevant 5 years from now as they are today.
Mm. Thank you so much. Um, Sorry we don't have 2 more hours to really go deeper into these issues, but I've got to now pass the microphone over to our senior project manager, Gabby Cooper, who will lead the Q&A portion of our webinar.
Okay,
Thank you, Reggie, and thank you, Secretary Johnson, for being here with us today.
sure thing.
So, our first question is, what advice would you give young people who want to pursue a career in public service today?
Um, there are lots of avenues for doing that. At the state level, for example, whether you live in New York, New Jersey, or elsewhere, um, or there are a number of ways to serve the public interest without working in government per se.
Mhm.
Um, Advocacy organizations. If you're a lawyer, if you're a law student, you might spend a couple of years in big laws paying off your student debt. Um, but there are opportunities that are less than obvious. Um, for example, when people think about being a lawyer for the U.S. government, they think Department of Justice. No,
Mhm.
no, no, you're not thinking broadly enough. I didn't even know about the job of General Counsel of the Department of the Air Force until I was offered it. I didn't even know it existed.
Oh, wow.
Really, what does the General Counsel of the Air Force do? I had to go do research. I had to do
Mhm.
homework to find out. There are over 10,000 lawyers in the Department of Defense. Most of them are JAGs, but there are over 10,000 lawyers in the Department of Defense. There are hundreds and hundreds of lawyers in the intelligence community. Every government agency has an office of general counsel, but there are also opportunities at the state and local level. Um, Once criminal justice gets back to normal in this country, um, being an assistant United States attorney, which is what I did 35 years ago, is truly an apolitical job. I was hired during a Republican administration
Mhm.
by Rudy Giuliani, 1988,
Wow.
under the presidency of George H.W. Bush, though I'm a Democrat. So there are opportunities that are more political than others. And if your politics do not align with the politics of the current administration in Washington, I'd be wary of that. But over over 90%, maybe 95% of lawyering, I'm using lawyering because I'm a lawyer,
Mhm.
uh, in the federal government is apolitical. It happens the same no matter whether the president is Donald Trump or Barack Obama.
Thank you. So, our next question is, looking back, is there a particular decision you made in government that taught you the most about servant leadership?
Yes. Um, well, first of all, learn from your mistakes. Every
Mhm.
mistake is an opportunity to improve, learn. Those who don't learn from mistakes are bound to repeat their mistakes. Um, I would say, and this is in a book called Killer Capture. Um, one of my responsibilities when I was general counsel of the Department of Defense was I had to sign off on counterterrorism operations. I had to get the legal sign off
Mhm.
before it went to the Secretary of Defense and the President for approval. I'd have to give the legal green light or red light. And
Yeah.
you can't fudge. It's either red light, green light, one or the other. And sometimes I'd have a day to think about it. Sometimes I'd have 30 minutes to think about it. Um, the first time I said no, everybody kind of snapped their head back and um, they were not happy that I said no to a particular counterterrorism operation. It was like, by the time it gets to my level in government, it's like a speeding freight train. Okay, okay, stand out of the way, give the green light. And I
Yeah.
said no. And from that, the people in the chain of command learned that they had to work a lot harder to get my approval. They actually, I, they actually gained respect for me because I said no. Um, you know, forgive this is not a PC way of putting it, but they realized I wasn't a cheap date
Hmm.
and that they were going to have to work a lot harder to convince me and that I was going to be the most significant stop on that train before it ultimately reached the president for approval.
Yeah. And what you said about mistakes earlier, we teach here at the center that it's important to have environments where people feel comfortable admitting mistakes. Like, hey,
Yes,
I messed up here. Let's learn from it, and not an environment where people are penalized for speaking up.
there are very few things. People ask me if you had something to do over again, what would it be?
Mm.
Well, of course. I mean, if I could, with the benefit of a crystal ball, I'd be a multi-billionaire in the stock
All of
market.
us.
But there are very few things that I would take back because every mistake was a learning experience. The one thing I would take back, if I could, 50 years ago, 50 years ago and 1 month, I was a freshman in college
Mhm.
and I accidentally put this arm through a glass window,
Wow.
which, by the way, ruined my baseball career. I was a stupid freshman and my buddies and I used to race from one end of the hall to the other in the dorm. And I got to the end of the hall. I was trying to beat this kid, and I had no plan to stop. And I accidentally put my arm through this big plate glass window at the end of the hall, did all kinds of damage to this arm. That's like the, if I had 1 minute in my life to take back again, that would
Mhm.
be it. But every other mistake I have made, and I freely admit them, were also learning experiences.
Definitely.
Yep.
So, our next question is, how do you personally handle disagreement or criticism when serving in a high visibility role?
Um, so it is natural to be defensive about criticism, and I suffer from that too. I admit that. Um, I think what's important, and this is something that Bob Gates, who was Secretary of Defense when I was DOD General Counsel, he taught me people will not always agree with your decision, but if they feel like they've been heard, they are more likely to support your decision. So if you give people a seat at the table to express their points of view, even when you know there's going to be crossfire and disagreement, you come up with a smart, healthy decision because everyone's had a chance to air their point of view. You encourage people to air disagreements. And then when the decision is made, they're more likely to support it because they feel like they've been heard. Okay, he didn't agree with me, but I know he heard my point of view. And very often, the people you have to convince of your point of view are the very same people that have to then go implement your decision.
Mhm.
So, which is why I've always believed that it's important to have in your decision making process a range of people who you know are going to disagree.
Yeah.
It's not
Respectfully disagree.
it's not if you have six people who are all going to agree because they have the same philosophy of life, the same risk tolerance, same political leanings, that does me no good.
Mhm. Definitely. So our last question for today is, what habits or daily practices helped you stay grounded while working in high pressure national
Ah,
security positions?
I'm so glad you asked.
Mhm.
So I have two hobbies. One I've had all my life. The other one I embraced just recently. Um, it will surprise some of you to know that I'm a DJ on radio.
Oh, wow.
Now, nobody your age has a radio anymore. I know that,
Yeah.
except maybe in your car.
Mhm.
But I have a radio show on WBGO 88.3 FM, based in Newark, New Jersey. It's public radio. During the week, WBGO is jazz. During the weekends, it's classic R&B. That's my thing, classic R&B. So I have a radio show once a month called All Things Soul. I assemble the playlist. I have one interview per show. My first interview was former President Bill Clinton. He agreed to be on my show to talk about his love of the saxophone. And I just love doing this. I love assembling the playlist. I love sharing my music with a wider audience. And then the other thing, my other hobby is is this. What do you see?
Trains
Where do you think that
for
is?
traveling.
Where is
Um,
that?
a little hard to tell. I'm not quite sure.
It's in my basement.
Oh, wow. That looked
Yeah,
like a,
it's in my basement. And
oh my
so
God.
I have my train set down there. It's HO scale. And a train set is not just a train set. It's like your own little world. It's like this gigantic dollhouse. So this is I talked about Corona Queens earlier. That
Mhm.
is a replica of the apartment building we lived in Corona, Queens. That's part of
Wow.
my train set. Um, this is a crime scene in my train set. Um, and it's also it's also bear with me. It's much more than just trains and streets. Here's my U-Haul rental lot.
Oh,
Um, here is
this is
here is
wonderful.
the White Castle. Uh, the DQ. I got a fast food alley. It sort
And
of
so you
resembles what.
assemble all these?
Well, I had somebody. I would lie if I told you I
Okay.
assembled it. I have somebody who assembled these for me. Here's KFC when it was called
Oh,
Kentucky Fried Chicken. So this is like McCarter Highway in Newark.
Oh,
wow.
And last but not least, the Golden Arches.
McDonald's.
So
Mickey D's.
yep, yep. So those are my two hobbies, distractions, diversions from my daily work.
That's wonderful.
All
Well,
things soul. My next show will air
yes.
uh, a week from a weekend after next, I believe.
Okay. We'll
Yep,
be tuned in.
8 a.m. Saturday morning.
Wonderful.
8 a.m. Gabby, I think there's one more question
Oh, I don't
Raise
see. I saw someone had their hand raised, but a question isn't submitted in the
in the
feed.
chat feature.
Yeah. Um, no, I'm not
Can you add?
seeing one.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll get Lolita the next time.
Mm.
Uh,
Thank
Mrs.
you so much
Yes,
for being here with us
Mrs.
today.
Well,
Secretary.
thanks for
Do
having me.
I do
Uh,
have a brief few announcements about the center.
before your announcements, Gabby, just want
Sure.
to again on behalf of the center, Mr. Secretary, thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm probably not the only one that's glad that you didn't find your way, to the Mets or the Yankees. We're all the better off for your having served our nation, and we hope you come back.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Gabby, announcements.
So very quickly, April registration for Foundations of Servant Leadership is open. This course examines the efficacy of leadership approach that fosters growth in others, builds strong, vibrant teams, and leads organizations and communities better than the way they were found. You can visit greenleaf.org, and registration is linked to our homepage. Applications for the 2026 Greenleaf Scholars Program are now open. This program funds researchers whose work promotes the efficacy and impact of servant leadership. To learn how to apply and to learn more about eligibility, you can visit greenleaf.org, where all the information is also linked to our homepage. Additionally, the center is now accepting nominations for the 2026 Annual Servant Leader Hall of Fame. This accolade recognizes individuals and organizations who have demonstrated a longstanding commitment to the principles and practices of servant leadership. To submit a nomination, please visit greenleaf.org, where you'll find the criteria and nomination instructions. And lastly, we're excited to invite you to our next webinar featuring New Jersey's first Lieutenant Governor, Kim Guadagno. She'll be joining us on March 11th in celebration of Women's History Month, and we hope to see you there. If you'd like to stay connected with the Greenleaf Center for all updates, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram through these QR codes here. And last but very not least, if you could please take the Zoom survey that pops up at the end of this webinar, we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you all so much for logging on with us today, and we really appreciate Secretary Johnson for being here with us. Take care.